Good evening. Welcome everyone, both in person and virtually. My name is Richard Yancey. I'm the Executive Director of the Building Energy Exchange, and we are thrilled to be hosting this evening's event. And I gotta believe it's amazing to be in the same space with other people again. Tonight, we celebrate Stephen Winter Associates' 50th year in business. And in typical SWA fashion, they wanted a party. But also, because they're kind of energy nerds, they wanted to create a meaningful discussion. So tonight, we are taking on no small task, but showcasing 50 years past and future sustainability in the New York City area, as told by local industry professionals, collaborators, longtime collaborators of Stephen Winter Associates, and Stephen Winter himself. So 50 years, I had to look that up, 1972. Richard Nixon was president, Vietnam War, Watergate, the Clean Water Act passed, which created the Environmental Protection Agency. But we didn't talk about sustainability per se, but more about environmental degradation, pollution, poisoned drinking water, littering. And then there was Pong, the video game. The last man tripped to the moon, Apollo 17, if you can believe it. And Bobby Fischer beat Boris Spassky. And I was a 9-year-old kid from Brooklyn, sporting some purple bell-bottom jeans and listening to the Beatles' White Album. But what was Stephen Winter doing in 1972? Stephen Winter was making change happen. He was taking huge risks. He founded a new company, which is crazy if anyone's tried to do it. New companies have a 90% failure rate. He was a young architect realizing how inefficient business as usual was for buildings. Antiquated design and construction methods, toxic materials, and wasted natural resources. So Stephen envisioned a company that had never existed before. A consultancy that does research, engineering, and advising on how to improve our buildings, making them more efficient, making them healthier, and making them more accessible. It would take David Gottfried, Rick Fedrizzi, and Rob Watson, who always claim all the spotlights, 21 more years before they even began to found the USGBC and lead. And oh, by the way, Stephen was chair of their board for 4 years, from 1999 to 2003. Fast forward 50 years, Stephen and the SWA crew have created a sustainability juggernaut, attracting and supporting legions of talented, super smart, thoughtful leaders who collectively have a really big impact. So tonight we're in for a treat. First, Stephen is going to share some highlights of that journey with us, and then they've curated a group of leaders and provocateurs who are going to take a moment of respite from their daily professional trench warfare against climate change and share with us some thoughts they have on sustainability in the next 50 years. So with that, it's my pleasure to introduce the chairman of Stephen Winter Associates, the teacher and mentor to many, an architect, entrepreneur, and a visionary, and someone who always makes time for a good party. I give you Stephen Winter.
Thank you, Richard. I think my work is done. And hello, everyone. It's so great to be out, to see everybody face to face. Hi, David. It's my second industry event in 2 years, and it's wonderful to see everybody. it'll be almost exactly 2 weeks until the 1st of May, which is the actual 50th birthday of our company. And I'd like to share with you just a few snippets, decade by decade, of some of the things we've done in that time. As Richard had implied, there was no such thing as sustainability 50 years ago. It wasn't even energy efficiency. It was building science that I was peddling, building science and technical approaches to solving construction problems. That's what I started the business as. So here's a few snippets. Okay. One of these has to do it. Oh, there we go. Okay, the 1970s. In the 70s, we saw years of booms and busts in the US construction industry. And it was growing rapidly and exhibited what we now see as shoddy practices and inefficient uses of resources. There were many opportunities to improve what was going on. And our approach to doing it was to provide know-how in the prefabricated housing industry. Prefabs was what we were good at. Using wood construction, steel, concrete, and other structural materials, we completed assignments for more than 440 different housing manufacturers in 42 states and several foreign countries. We also provided some cost-saving services using value engineering techniques to reduce labor and material costs. That was the 70s. In the 80s, following the Arab oil embargo and the resulting fuel shortages and price hikes, there were unprecedented needs for providing support to conserve energy and control its use. This was evidenced in all parts of buildings, building envelopes, equipment, controls, operation and maintenance. Builders and designers were seeking guidance to apply better techniques to their projects. Government agencies wanted input to establish guidelines and standards. The entire industry needed training for its members. And we were there to help them out. Who remembers the BEPS, the Building Energy Performance Standards? Yes, we were there. The 1990s. The 1990s saw the gold rush to all things green and sustainable. As Richard implied, it was Gottfried and the closely following group of acolytes. Everything seemed to be green and sustainable. The US Green Building Council standards helped pave the way for a whole bunch of practices, government incentives and consumer demands for sustainable buildings. As Richard mentioned, I was chair of, at that time, they were begging people to be chair of something. I was chair from 99 to 2003 and helped oversee the introduction of LEED to the marketplace and also the launch of Green Build, its annual conference and trade show. And from that decade to this day, sustainability was the foundation of how buildings were conceived, built, and managed. Onto the 2000s. The laws, codes, and standards protecting people who are aging or disabled finally gained prominence. And although the laws had been in effect for some years, they were not being enforced. So designers and builders largely ignored them. But suddenly, major lawsuits were brought against them. They were brought by civil rights groups, consumer organizations, ambulance-chasing lawyers, and the Justice Department itself. Since then, and it's still ongoing, we've provided services to help organizations meet these accessibility regulations, and if they run afoul of the rules, to help them resolve violations and get back to business. The biggest problems we've seen were in multifamily housing, the biggest violators, that is, were in multifamily housing, hotels, healthcare, but no building sector remained unscathed. The 2010s. The 2010s. Superstorm Sandy ravaged the city in 2012, and it seemed like the built environment had been increasingly whacked by disasters of all kinds. Floods, fires, hurricanes, and earthquakes, and even man-made disasters like crime, conflict, and neglect. This led to opportunities for our company to improve buildings and to improve their resistance to disasters and to aid in their recovery and reconstruction. At the same time, we got involved with improving the durability and longevity of buildings and building envelopes through our enclosure consulting practice. And here we are in the 2020s. The decade has barely begun, and we're already seeing many growing sustainability needs and opportunities. Decarbonization, which was unheard of 10 years ago, never mind 50 years ago. Health, security, of course, but also social equity, international cooperation, and a whole bunch of other opportunities. So looking back on 50 years of trying to improve the built environment, I must say that each decade has had differing sustainability opportunities with varying needs for skill sets and solution strategies. But the common thread, the consistent theme for half a century, has been to employ good people, think strategically, work hard, have some fun, and stay focused on the goals. The goals being to enhance our community, protect our planet, while ensuring our own survival and growth. Thank you.
Thank you for that walk through the decades. So now if I can ask each of you to come sit down the panel, and we'll get started with the next portion of the show. Groovy. Okay, so to get started, we all know who's at the other end. I would like each of the panelists to introduce themselves and just name, title, who you are, and something, either your relationship to Stephen when you first met him, I don't know, whatever. How you work with SWA, I don't know. Starting with, not you, Stephen.
Hi, hello, can you hear me?
Yeah.
Yeah, great. My name is Luke Falk. I work for now a clean energy development company called energyRe, where I lead the development of some clean energy projects that we'll talk about later. I met Stephen when I worked for NYSERDA before I had my last job. So that was a long time ago. At this point, we're getting old. And I remember the first thing Stephen said to me was, "What's with the hair?" Actually. So I'm pleased to be here tonight.
I'm Gina Bocra. I'm an architect and chief sustainability officer at Department of Buildings, where I lead a team of architects and engineers that's growing bigger, thankfully. Focused on energy code and sustainability laws in New York City, including our latest decarbonization efforts for the built environment. I think your dates are wrong, Stephen, because I know I met you when I started volunteering for USGBC, and it couldn't have been 1990s. Couldn't have been. And I started working at a firm that was a founder of USGBC, along with those three individuals, really supportive. I'm incredibly grateful because it launched my career on its trajectory, and was in part because of the work that I had done at USGBC as a volunteer, but I also had the opportunity to work on either a Build America or a DOE contract of some kind with Stephen's team in Washington, D.C. And then we became more familiar with each other through U.S. Green Building Council, what I'd like to think of its real golden age for that organization. It really launched sustainability into the mainstream, and I know that was partially because of your leadership.
And Marc.
Marc Zuluaga, co-founder of Cadence OneFive. I grew up at Stephen Winter Associates. Not too long after I turned 21, I got a opener that Andy Padian bought that says 30th anniversary, 1970 to 2002, always open to new ideas. And I think that really encapsulates a lot, maybe everything of the good that SWA has brought to the industry, and specifically all the people. I mean, it's been a true platform to allow so many different people to contribute in different ways over the years. And I'm grateful for that to Stephen, and I'm grateful to also SWA's new CEO, Srikanth, for their full corporate support of the next chapter in what I'm doing in this industry. But glad to be here, and thank you again.
Good evening. My name is David Davenport. I'm currently managing director at the New York Green Bank. And it's a great pleasure to be here this evening, celebrating 50 years of Steve Winter Associates. I kind of got here through the people to my right. About 12 years ago, I left the world of community development finance and came out around the time that Obama was coming into office and talking about the economic opportunity for the urban areas is retrofitting buildings, going into neighborhoods and having impact by improving asset values and creating jobs doing the work. I was able to work with one of my clients when I was at the bank that owned a large number of multifamily buildings. And together we put together an ambitious program to retrofit through energy efficiency measures and on-site power measures many of the city's largest multifamily buildings. And I used the NYSERDA multifamily performance program where I chased a fellow named Luke Falk around. He was the administrator of the program at the time. And I remember going to a presentation he was giving, and he was talking about which buildings worked and which buildings didn't. And he looked out in the audience and said, "I see our friends from Steve Winter Associates are here, and they're really leading the way in what's working and what's not." So I looked around, and there was Marc Zuluaga. I says to myself, I gotta work with these Steve Winter guys. And over the course of the next 10 years, we worked together, and I think we did something like 60 buildings together with SWA doing the projections and providing the step-by-step instructions. A couple of them we did on a finance basis, and I was really focused on demonstrating that the dollar invested in energy efficiency and renewable energy in buildings could generate cash flow. And we did that. So I'm really grateful to Steve Winter Associates and my association with these guys, and pleased to be here celebrating tonight.
So not an underachieving panel. So we're going to start tonight with kind of actually now going this way down the road, allowing each of the panelists, before I actually start asking more questions, to reflect a little bit on, well, really, quite frankly, anything they want to. But the prompt is, how has sustainability in New York City evolved with regard to financing, building technology, real estate, and policies, i.e., how far have we come in the past 50 years? And so, Dave, you're with the Green Bank. We can start with you.
Sure. Well, we've come a long way. When I started doing the work with the buildings, I was working with owners that were using cash flow and relying on incentive programs. NYSERDA had limited programs through the multifamily performance program and a few others in a very small office in New York City. I think it was 15 or 30 people. Now that's up to 150 people. There are multiple programs. The programs are more deeply funded. We have NYSEC, the New York City Energy Efficiency Finance Corporation, that provides capital to projects. And we have the New York Green Bank, which was capitalized with $1 billion to do renewable energy and building decarbonization projects. So there's been a tremendous growth.
Marc, you might have some slides.
I got some data. I'll just I
got some data. Settle in. No.
So I'll jump into it. So, looking back, I think it's really important that we all recognize kind of what went down over the past 10 years with energy use in the city, based on UGC's citywide benchmark energy study. Energy use in our buildings basically hasn't moved since 2012. It's basically, progress has been in the noise. And I guess the question is, even though all these policies and actions and hiring were ramping up, what does that mean for the future? I think, the far future is easier to predict. The near future is harder. I mean, at some point in the next 50 years, we'll stop burning fossil fuel in buildings. I'm going to go out on a limb. But what happens in the next 10 to 15 years is much more of the open question. The good news is that this is not a diffuse problem, especially when it comes to bigger buildings. The fossil fuel use is concentrated in really a handful of frankly blue states around the country. So I think when it comes to our work in New York, we sort of have two doors. Door number one is we make some improvements to kind of current means and methods. We gradually ramp up what we're doing. We do better than last decade. Maybe by some point in the 2030s, we hit our stride. I'm going to call that the Las Vegas scenario, in that whatever happens in New York will stay in New York. We will not be far enough ahead of everybody to really matter outside of the city. Door number two is it's not 50 years. Like IPCC says we have 50 months to get our act together, more or less. And a bunch of stuff needs to happen in that 50 months that has never been done before. Every refi and reposition becomes a major retrofit. All those end-of-life decisions or upgrades with these systems that only happen once in the next couple of decades are leveraged instead of squandered. And we generally ramp up a whole bunch of activities at the cadence required to keep things at the 1.5C limit. Door number two is also a force multiplier. I think progress locally will energize cities across the country, starting probably with the ones that have already followed our lead when it comes to benchmarking. And I think folks in this room and connections to Building Energy Exchange virtually can do a lot to influence which door we pick. But I think it's also important that we include some folks that are not, at least in this room here. In a city that's 68% non-white, less than 5% of our energy efficiency contractors are MWBEs. We all know banks, all else being equal, prefer to lend money to building owners that frankly don't need it quite as much. And the 17 death tragedy at Twin Parks Northeast in the Bronx, where 8 children died as a result of a space heater malfunction, really underscore the link between basic housing quality and retrofits. Bottom line, as important as when we get there is, how we get there is even more important. And I'm personally looking forward to working with absolutely everybody in this industry who's open to new ideas, the truly new ideas that will be required to get us to where we need to go as fast as possible and with as many different people as possible. Thanks. No more slides.
Gina?
I really think, this is going to be shocking, that we are going to need more mandates. And so I spent a lot of my career working with U.S. Green Building Council, voluntary programs, and we have barely seen the needle move in the building sector based on all those programs, which are all wonderful and great, and they really have influenced a lot of the work that we're all doing up here. So I really mean it, that the work that you were doing at USGBC in the early years of that organization was incredibly transformative. But we need to take that choice away of either picking progress or business as usual. So I do think that we will see more cities go down the path of mandatory improvements to buildings like we have done in New York City. We do have other cities that have started to do a building performance standard and implement it. But what I'm thinking about a lot lately is how we really need to make it super easy for owners so that when they're making those choices, the easiest choice is the right choice. And the one thing that I think about that I've seen in the last decade in our work at Department of Buildings is the changes we've made in the code related to air leakage. And I can't tell you how many sets of drawings have come across our desks that have SWA air leakage details in the drawings. It's like they went viral. So I hope you're incredibly proud of that influence. And we have to figure out ways to make all of our other decarbonization work, the work that we need to do to improve buildings, as easy for everybody to adopt and embrace as SWA air leakage details.
I wish we could have gotten paid for that.
I wish you could have too. So I think we have to make it really simple, really normalized. And then I think another thing that we have to be very cognizant of is that we can't just talk to each other about this. What we're asking for is nothing short of a complete remaking of our economy. And what we know is climate change will make every other problem that we're dealing with. I can't think of anything that is going to be, exempt from this, but every other problem will get worse with climate change. So we have to continue talking about how buildings are the solution with everybody that we possibly can, and not just in our group of like-minded folks. So we just have to keep talking.
Excellent. Thank you. And Luke?
Yeah. So first, it's just really nice to be in a room full of people who are great, and that's one of the reasons why I really love being around Stephen, because I get to learn a lot of things from a lot of smart people who are smarter than me, and it's always been that way. And everybody who's here has taught me so much. So thanks for that. In terms of how's it gone for the last, looking back, how have we made progress? I mean, I think it's impossible to overstate that there's been a huge amount of attention and activity and engagement on the issue of buildings and energy and climate. When I started my career in this arena, I was the 5th person who worked at NYSERDA's New York City office. And there wasn't, this is a great story. I remember going to City Hall. I was in a grad program at NYU, and one of my professors was a senior advisor to Mayor Bloomberg in his first term. I think this was 2005. And I went to City Hall to the bullpen and met the guy for an informational interview, or basically it was can you help me get a job, please? And we sat down, and I was like, yeah, I'm pretty interested in the idea of buildings and green buildings and energy use and making them more efficient. And he just looked at me completely flummoxed and was like, I don't know, dude. I got nothing for you. I don't know anything about that. I don't know where you could find that. And I was like, Andy Padian had taught, the first time I met Andy, he lectured to my class. And he was the first person who I heard say the word NYSERDA, but I couldn't actually find the word because I wrote it down wrong. I thought it was and I wasn't good at the Google machine. So I wandered around saying it wrong for a while before I figured it out. And so it's just crazy to me, the rapidity with which we went from, this is an interesting idea, to the built environment is the vector through which we will solve the climate crisis. And The policy superstructure within which we're all operating, I think clearly has placed a large bet on that assertion being true. And Local Law 97, I think, is a real moment where we're calling the question around whether or not we're right. And it's pretty complicated, and there's going to have to be a lot of people involved in solving the problem. From my perspective, having worked at a large owner and operator of buildings called the Related Companies for a decade, it's really difficult, but I've seen our practice change over time. I mean, I think it's really important to acknowledge that a lot of the innovation in the building performance space is like coming out of the affordable housing community, who have been leaders in trying to figure this issue out, all the way from like what the actual interventions are to how to deploy them through programs and scale it up and do market transformation work. The solutions that we've come up with yet, while wonderful, are probably not commensurate with the scale and complexity of the problem that we're facing. Over time, we've adopted as standard practice some of the things that were super innovative. I remember Marc and I were standing on the roof of 1050 Amsterdam blowing aeroseal into ducts for the first time in any building in New York City. And then, 5 years later, that was our basis of design, standard practice. And it's not about the ability for owners to adopt technology. It's the fact that it's just a huge problem. So my new frame of mind on this is that, you read literature and people are messy and chaotic and driven by a set of heuristics that has nothing to do with optimizing, their own self-interest most of the time. And energy efficiency and sustainability, I think the way we all think about it is premised on zero waste. Right? You can't have a leaky faucet. You can't have a leaky window. You can't, if you draw to its logical conclusion a lot of the thoughts that we're thinking, you can't accidentally take a book in your car because it's unnecessary energy waste to transport the book that you didn't have to read from here to there. But that's never going to be the way that humanity operates. We're always going to have chaos and waste and entropy and messiness. And so my new theory of the case is that what we need to do is solve the source of energy so that it doesn't matter that people are going to waste it, which is why, among other things, we advanced a project with the state of New York called Clean Path New York, which is being developed by my company, energyRe, in partnership with Invenergy, which is a private developer out of Chicago, and the New York Power Authority. And together we're building 3,800 megawatts of wind and solar generation, all scattered throughout the state of New York. And we're tying that to a transmission line that we're building in the Western Catskills to connect Delhi, New York to the borough of Queens, all underground or underwater. And in so doing, when we activate the project in 2027, the energy that we bring into the city is going to be clean electrons that constitute 16% of the city's annual energy consumption. And it's going to supplant 22% of all of the fossil fuel fired generation across the state of New York every year. And it's going to cost $11 billion, but it's going to create 8,300 jobs, all of which are located in the state of New York. And we're going to constitute a community investment fund of $270 million to do exactly the type of work that Marc was alluding to scale workforce development and environmental justice initiatives.
Okay.
And
So,
let me just say that today,
clean energy,
serendipitously, our project was approved by the Public Service Commission to move ahead.
Bravo.
So how about that? So now all we have to do is make all those buildings
Yeah, still
all
gotta get the
electric.
boilers out of the basement. Stephen.
I thought I was off the hook.
No, you're at the end of the line there, so you get to back clean up on this. Looking back, how have we done? I mean, you gave us a nice summary. How have we done in the last 50 years?
Well, I think we've done extraordinarily well. I think we don't realize how much we've done. As I alluded to a few minutes ago, from a start of where energy was just not understood as being wasted, sustainability was not even being recognized as an issue, and decarbonization hadn't even become a word yet. From that to this is just a remarkable progress. I'm actually more interested in the next 50 years, what you geniuses are going to come up with for how to solve the problem and what's going to happen over the next 50 years.
So let's go with that. What will the next 50 years look like? Dave, do you want to start?
Well, the next 50 years is very promising. The governor of the state, in her State of the State address, made a commitment to electrify over 2 million units of housing over the next decade. And across the state agencies, we are working collaboratively to put together the policies and the funds to make that happen. I also expect that we will see greater regulation. You need the carrot and the stick, to the point my colleague here made. So along with additional funds, along with a great deal of experience that is now in this sector about what works and what doesn't and how to do things efficiently, I think the market is ready to move, but it needs a push. We have the financing to do it. The state and the utility companies are expanding incentives to do it. And we know how to get it. We know how to get it done efficiently. But we do need regulatory push.
Yeah, and so Marc, you kind of did the Debbie Downer thing at the beginning, which is not uncommon. If you sat in a lot of meetings with Marc, he comes armed with statistics which are not optimistic all the time, or the reality of the problem. And you're trying to solve it a different way now. I mean, what's the biggest barrier to overcome in the next 50 years, and how do you think we're going to do that?
Again, I'm just thinking the next 50 months, but I think the big unlock, in my opinion, is making the problem even bigger. And here's what I mean. So for my career, it was building as a system, right? Dean's here. I mean, building as a system, and it was a great framework for figuring things out. The envelope affects the mechanical. You do one, you make the other smaller, and it really worked. But it was the key. It was never going to get us all the way to decarbonization. The key was never in that box. But if you increase the system boundary to the city or the network scale, and now all of a sudden you say, city as a system, and or state as a system, and Luke brings, 7.5 million, or gigawatt hours or whatever he's bringing down from upstate, and then you electrify buildings, which is, by the way, going to be illegal to build a non-electric building, a new building in a couple of years. All of a sudden you're done. You're not done in a couple of case studies. Your new construction is taken care of. Right? And this is what we've been grappling with for the past 15 years. The Class A office buildings that no one's been able to figure out for a long time. I mean, Con Ed's going to make the district steam grid completely green, and the electric grid. I mean, they're on a complete glide path to decarbonization. That's pretty frictionless. I think that's also making the problem bigger. The last kind of, the last frontier is, the other 90%, all the fossil fuel infrastructure. That's going to be the hardest. We're not there yet, but ultimately, there's going to need to be a managed retreat from the gas grid. It's not about building by building interventions. It's like we grew the gas grid by going zone by zone. We need to retreat from it zone by zone at the district level. Instead of putting in $100 million in new pipes, you do electrification, load reduction in those areas. And I think that's the solution. We need to pilot a bunch of stuff in a bunch of buildings before we're there. But ultimately, that will be the most rational approach, and that'll be the most scalable approach. And I think that's what I'm optimistic about.
I mean, you already tipped your hand, Gina, with regulation, but
I did. But I think to just build on what Marc said, I think our next step is figuring out what regulation works to help us through that managed retreat, and beginning to understand how we can electrify our existing building stock. Where does it make sense first? And then how do we help those owners that are going to have that infrastructure in place for a long time to plan for that transition? And so I know that through the work of the city, through the work of the state, we're going to tackle that problem next. And then we also have to look at that problem of embodied carbon and, 80-20 rule. How can we get to the issue of really big sources of embodied carbon in construction, because that's a huge issue on a global scale, and the construction industry can't just look at operational carbon anymore. So we have to make that transition over time as well.
What does the next 50 years look like? I mean, hard to argue with Marc's assessment of what the strategic vision needs to be. I think that I fully agree with that, and that we're doing everything we can to help enable that outcome. That having been said, so I think it just comes, so Wordsworth, right? I've been doing a lot of deep thinking in preparation for this panel. So Wordsworth has a poem, "The world is too much with us late and soon. Getting and spending, we lay waste our powers. Little in nature do we see that's ours. We've given our hearts away, a sordid boon." It goes on and on. But at the end, the thing that gives him hope is a vision of Proteus rising from the sea, right? And why Proteus? Because Proteus is the shapeshifter. And I think that what we need to do is be cognizant of tactically through innovation, like the solution set, we should be prepared to be adaptive and protean in the approach to what needs to be done, and flexible. And, lots of people are talking about hydrogen or long duration storage or blah, blah, blah. It's all good. It's all important. It's all huge opportunity. It's all economic development and opportunity for lots of people. And we're just going to have to do all of it.
all of the above. Thanks for that riff on Wordsworth. This is a great collection of folks who've seen a lot of work and been involved in a lot of work. And so I'm very interested, and I want to start with you, Stephen, if you can kind of single out one project that you worked on that you either found particularly inspirational or that it was somehow, you're kind of transformative in terms of the way you viewed the opportunity of sustainability in the built environment. And it can just be your favorite project too.
Well, maybe not my favorite project, but one that blows me away is Peter Cooper Village in Stuyvesant town. We didn't do that much to help it, but it needed help so dramatically. And it was a lower cost project. It was people who were middle and lower income, although some were sneaking in as higher income people, of course. But it was, 11,000 apartments or whatever the number is. It's such a huge, massive piece of New York City's architecture that looks terrible, and yet a difference was made there. A difference was made, and I was particularly proud of that. Has anyone been to Peter Cooper Village? It's like, I mean, it's one thing to go to Hudson Yards and say how magnificent, but something that's like something that's been there for decades and almost to the point of crumbling when we first got involved with it. To bring that back a little bit, even, I think that was really heartwarming and rewarding.
I was happy to be able to manage that project that funded that work when I was at NYSERDA. It was wonderful. It was really interesting. it was really interesting.
Anyone else? Favorite project that has inspired you or been transformative? Okay, I know some of your projects. I'm going to start talking about them.
For me, it was Roosevelt Landings, which at the time was the largest multifamily retrofit that was being done. 1,003 units across 10 building complex, former Mitchell-Lama, with electric heat. That involved multiple energy efficiency measures, including submetering, including Zigbee mesh network control of heat, including fenestration, replacement of tons of windows, air sealing in the walls and in the ceilings and the floors, LED work, complete overhaul of the mechanical room to include cogeneration, the creation of an off-balance sheet financial vehicle to arrange the financing for it, because it was the project was done during the hold period, not at acquisition, not at a refinancing, but during the hold period. So we had to come up with an innovative way of financing it off balance sheet through the creation of a special purpose vehicle and the use of energy service agreements and power purchase agreements to repay the loans. I think it was one of NYSEG's first loans. We won an award for financial innovation, and some folks had said it was too big, and it was going to be a Sisyphean task. I don't know if I can use big words like Luke Falk. But there were times when I was dealing with all the financial people and all the asset managers, and worried, is this in fact too big? And I remember calling Steve, and I said, Steve, is this really going to work? And Steve's comment was, not only do I know it's going to work, I guarantee it. Guarantee it. And that stayed with me. It is that sort of commitment and knowledge about the industry that Steve Winter Associates has offered over these years, and I really appreciate it.
Yeah, the two things that those projects have in common are that they were sub-metering projects that featured community meetings wherein giant rooms of people yelled at me for a long time.
There's more than two projects that happened, just to confirm.
Yeah. Marc, what about you?
It's like your kids, you can't pick a favorite. I would say the kind of project, especially looking forward, that I think most excites me is one where like any project can fail, but you got to ask the question, if this is wildly successful, like, will it matter? Will it move the needle? I mean, Lois's work with Luke and others on Cornell Tech. I mean, I don't know. I wasn't involved with it, but it certainly was unclear if it was going to happen. It was wildly successful, and it really had ripple effects. And I think, yes, all of the above, like Mr. Fox said about these different solutions, but at the same time, we do need to make choices because we only have so much time. And if you're doing a project and the answer to the question is, if this is wildly successful, will it matter? Will it move the needle? If the answer is no, like, do another project. I mean, I think that's my sort of philosophy going forward, given where we are in the industry.
Gina, do you have anything to add?
I don't get to work on projects, and my team sees 5,000 a year of your projects. And every once in a while, maybe once a quarter, an architect or an engineer will send us a note and say, thank you for what you taught me, because it's improved my practice. Most of the time we get complaints. Every once in a while we get that thank you letter. And then we work with words, and maybe half a dozen of our ideas in New York City Energy Code have worked their way into ASHRAE 90.1 after we launched it here and tried it out. And in many cases, people in this room were involved in helping us move those ideas forward. We have amazing volunteers that come from the industry to help us do our work. And we're really proud of those changes that leak out of New York and influence policy elsewhere.
I also thought it might be interesting to hear about, you mentioned the Cornell Tech Project, and it was very eye-opening to me to go on this trip in 2015 to Brussels and see all like these passive buildings. And actually Luke and Lois were both on that trip, I think most of the time. When I was going to bed, they seemed to be going out to explore Brussels. But they managed to get up and tour the buildings during the day too. And it was one thing like getting excited about pieces of equipment that weren't available in the United States that were available over there. But so that was a very inspirational trip. And I'm just wondering, in your practice, what are the ways, where have you found inspiration? And because this is not an easy task anyone's taken on. And you look at the numbers Marc put forward, you think about, the 50 months versus the 50 years. Everyone talks about 2050. We just saw the latest IPCC report, which definitely says we don't have to 2050. But what does keep you moving forward, and where have you found inspiration in the work?
Luke, you answer that.
Sure, I'll go, because I didn't get to talk about my favorite project. But maybe I did. Clean Path New York. Clean Path New York is my favorite project, even though it's just an idea at the moment. Actually, that's not true. It's much more than that. But what keeps me going? I agree that having a career based on reducing energy use is a tough road to hoe, because it's tough that your output is zero if you do your job right. But I think the thing that needs to keep all of us going is a moral imperative around feeling a sense of responsibility to do what you can do to solve a big, complicated problem that's an existential threat to us all. If you're sentimental about humanity, you should feel motivated to do the work, which I am. But like on a daily basis, what keeps me going? For a long time, it was watching change diffuse through communities and organizations. Like Gina's observation of that moment of recognition when people are like, you know what, there's something to this, and it's changed my point of view, both internally in our own company and externally when you like go on the road and do it. That's very gratifying, and I think at this point the new project that I'm working on is easy to want to get excited about. There's a huge supportive, policy in place to get us to where we need to go. I see in interactions with communities all across the state, a desire for the project to occur. People want renewable solutions. They want a sustainable outcome. I think that's what keeps me going, is the receptivity that we've observed or I've witnessed in hundreds of meetings and discussions with people about this great, big, clean energy future that we're all trying to usher forth.
You're not going to bite, Stephen?
When you've been in business for 50 years, it's a little difficult to talk about the next 50. I have to tell you, what I really wish is that I had 50 more years. That's what I really wish, because all this exciting stuff, I want to be there to witness it, to see it. That's what I really want to see. Over to you, Gina.
I can easily tell you what inspires me, and it's the people that show up to an event like this, all the people that are watching that are not here in the room, the individuals that are dedicating their work every day to continue the work that we are all doing together. And I think about how unusual it was, how oddly received it was when I graduated from school and started looking for a firm that would practice green architecture, who understood the word sustainability and what it meant. And I think back to the early days, Stephen, before Green Build, there were USGBC member summits. And if you remember, they always started out on the first day with everybody in the room getting up and saying where they were from. And it was a small community, and maybe there would be 300 to 400 people in the room at the most. And this community has grown so large and is continuing to grow. So it's making a difference.
I'd agree with that. And I'd say that, there's only so many hours in the day, and there's more work to do than we can do, right? That's my pessimism. But I think the connections that I've made in this industry as a guy that is a wallflower usually, but with the people that are passionate about this stuff, is something that I really appreciate and take inspiration for. And I'll tell you a quick story. So we were interviewing this new software company. We were interviewing this software people. I'm still trying to figure it out. But we interviewed this guy. He was into the mission we were doing, the developer. And then he didn't want to work with us, right? He took another job. It was a better fit. And we found out his new job. And it was a tech company that helps women sell women menopause products. And I don't, nothing against that. That's a necessary thing. But I was like, how can you go from climate change to that? Like, I don't get it, and I think, we need both. I'm not, but I just want to say that whether you're at one company or another in this space, we're all trying to move the needle and work together. And I think that's what we have all in common. So I do appreciate the mission kind of orientation of our industry. I apologize if I offended anybody. True story, though.
I can't believe it was you, not me.
I don't think you made that up.
I was trying to come up with a tamer version, but I wasn't creative enough.
Marc, is that your vision of the future, really?
So, we talk at the Green Bank, we talk about, transformative, and, we want to be transformative capital, and we want to deliver. There's something like, when you touch a piece of clay and you can mold it into something, and you can transform it into something. And, the world we live in and the type of work that people do is so far removed from creating value in a tangible way. I used to try to explain to my son when he was tiny what I did as an investment banker, and I could see the gears in his head just stop trying to understand transactions I was explaining. But when I started doing this work, I could take him to a building. I said, we're gonna make this building use less energy, and we're gonna do these things, and you can touch it, and you can have materially transformative power over assets that are in our communities that we don't have to go online or go into an office to transform. It's right there, and we can create jobs and equity doing it. So that's very empowering for me.
Yeah. Oh, can I tell one amazing story?
Okay.
Take
30 seconds.
Okay. So we did a retrofit of a big community of buildings in Queens, and we ordered triple pane windows, and they came and there was an issue with the order, and they all needed to be fixed. And then we got the windows, and it was great. And the residents loved it. They were triple pane windows. It was a great project. Fast forward 5 years later, the windows in my bedroom are horrible. And I've been I'm not going to replace the windows because it's the least cost effective thing to do. Finally, I broke and was I'm just going to buy triple pane windows for my bedroom, which I haven't done yet. But we went to this factory of the local producer, Wythe Windows, and I'm in their factory talking to the guy. And I'm talking like the origin story of his business. He was like, yeah, there was this developer that ordered all these windows for this project in Queens and they were all broken. And so I like started fixing them and then we got really into it. And like, I built this whole business and now we're like the main triple pane window supplier for the whole region. And I was like, that is amazing. Like, that's an outstanding outcome from a goof. But in service of energy efficiency. And so the ripple effects are real.
And I just wanted to, as we wrap up here, say the ripple effects of Stephen Winter, the business you have built. It's not just the amazing people who are in this room and elsewhere who currently are there, which is incredible. It's the amazing people who've come through that firm and gone off to start their own project or gone off to work somewhere else. And it's really been an amazing incubator to really kind of provide what we need to get this work done. So I really want to thank you so much for the work you've done.
Thank you.
Thank you, Richard.